All right, Ray. So we have more dealerships and more manufacturers that are in trouble. We have Mercedes-Benz that are now going to do cost cutting across their whole space, and it's going to end up costing a lot of people their jobs. We know that it's no secret Mercedes is having a hard time selling their vehicles. We've had plant closures, we've had layoffs already, but now Mercedes-Benz is making an announcement that we're doing even more cuts. So it's very interesting to me that we've seen this golden age that has happened over the last 2 or 3 years, and then all of a sudden the spigot's been turned off, and now we're seeing cuts across the board. We see cuts at Ford, see cuts at Stellantis, we're seeing cuts at VW, now we're seeing cuts Mercedes-Benz. We're seeing cuts at all of these manufacturers, and I think it's a warning for things to come that we're going to see more and more and more of this coming through the pipeline.
Well, I think as profits start to go down a little bit at most of these manufacturers, and you realize that they're going, or you just realize that because of circumstances beyond your control, profits are going to go down. At that point, you start to look at, well, we know we have waste. There isn't any major corporation out there that doesn't have waste. So now you start looking at, well, where's the waste? How much waste can we cut out? They're thinking at Mercedes, they got 30% waste. They want to figure out how to cut expenses by 30%. When you're making money hands over fist is actually when you should be looking at all that waste, but you don't because you're making money hands over fist. And when you realize, as you put it, that spigot is going to be turned off, that's when you start trying to look at for all that waste. So they're looking at cutting global staff. They're looking at whatever ways they can to save money because, as I think they put it, they think they're going to be choppy times in the automotive space for the next year or two.
Yeah, that's exactly what they said. They said Mercedes expects market choppiness for the next 2 to 3 years. And what they're going to do is, with some departments expected to reduce their budgets up to 30%. I saw 25% across the board in another location in this article. But we're seeing this, and then we had GM and Ford that recently put out their earnings, and they said 2025 is not going to be good.
Yeah,
that's and very in a lot fewer words than what they said, but that's basically what they said. And we're going to see more cuts. We're going to see more dealerships that have cuts too, because as you get more vehicles on these dealer lots, well, they have a lot more money in expenses that they have to pay. Things that were profit centers, like a floor plan assistance, are now their floor plans are going to end up costing them a lot more money. And when you have these margins that are shrinking, when you have profits that are shrinking, when you have added expenses, then they're going to start looking for things that can go. And one of the easiest places, it's sad to say, but one of the easiest places to cut costs is by manpower. And it's one of the easiest things because they can put out an email. We've seen other companies do it. Okay, you think you got a job today? Well, tomorrow, I'm sorry, you don't have one. And we're doing layoffs in the form of either buyouts or companies will just say, okay, we just need you going.
In the famous terms of my former employer, Mr. Roger Penske, always refer to that as human capital. And when you're looking to reduce costs, you reduce your human capital. You take a closer look at staffing and you say, well, do we really need 6 porters? Can we get by with 5 porters or 4 porters on the lot? Do we really need 4 finance and insurance managers? Can we get by with 2 or 3? And so the first place manufacturers look at is the human side of things, their workforce. Why do we have as many employees as we do? Do we really need this many employees? How many employees are duplicating the work of others so that we can cut back? And I believe that Mercedes-Benz is they're stating they want to reduce their global workforce by 20,000 people. That's 20,000 people globally that are now will have to look for a job in what will probably be a down job market, because if a lot of these companies are going to be reducing expenses through headcount, there's going to be a lot of unemployed people, qualified people in many cases, that are going to be battling with other qualified people for the few jobs that are out there. And the really sad part about this, from an employee perspective, is when there is an oversupply of qualified people for the position that you might have open, you don't have to pay them as well, because they might have been used to making $100,000 a year. And you're only offering 75. And the reason you're offering 75 is because, the next person in line will be desperate and will take the 75, because they figure they're better off having 75 than the 100. They're better off having 75 than nothing. And so I think it's going to be difficult for a lot of people out there globally because of this. It's going to be difficult for these manufacturers to look at the various departments and decide how do we cut these expenses? Where do we cut these expenses? And it's not all going to be human capital, as Roger used to call it, but there'll be other ways that they look at through improved buying practices, renegotiating contracts with suppliers, whatever it is. If they want to find a 30% savings, it's going to come from renegotiations and downsizing of staffs.
And I want to point this out. So we're going to have some of this downsizing. We already have this downsizing happen with a lot of these companies. Now, what's going to happen when and if we get some of these tariffs to come in? We're going to have added costs that are going to get pumped up into these manufacturers. I think of specifically the big three, where you have a lot of their product coming out of Mexico. And we have Jim Farley here talking about Trump is creating cost and chaos. And what Ford has recently said on their earnings report is that, okay, they think 2025, one, is going to be bad, but also a big headwind are these potential tariffs that are coming into place. And it's not, Ford doesn't believe it's a matter of really if, it's a matter of when it's going to happen, whether it's 25%, whether or not Trump is bluffing or not. There's going to be some kind of added cost that is associated with tariffs that come into the system. And this is what Ford believes. And whenever you have, labor costs that could potentially go up because of these tariffs, because Ford has said that if we have these tariffs, they're going to have to reallocate where they're producing a lot of their vehicles. And that means their labor cost is going to go up because their allocation of workforce is going to go from Mexico to the U.S. U.S. workers just cost more. That's what happens with these auto manufacturers. When you have that added cost, you're going to have labor that is reduced, at least just on Ford's side. But you're going to have all of these auto manufacturers. It's been said in a lot of these articles that the auto industry is going to be the hardest hit by these tariffs if they come into place. And if that happens, you're going to have manufacturers that are going to be cutting labor across the board, in my opinion.
And here's the worst part about it. We already have and have had for the last 4 years or so an affordability crisis in America when it comes to automobiles and trucks and SUVs. They're already too expensive for the vast majority of people out there. Well, this is only going to make it worse. This isn't going to make it better. Okay, this is going to make it worse. Prices are going to go up. And there won't be a big enough cut in interest rates to offset the new cost of what these vehicles are going to be on a retail basis to make up for. I mean, it just won't. So the vehicle prices could go up if we see the tariffs imposed. The monthly payment will go up because the price went up. The average monthly payment on a new car today is $756. How much higher can it go before people just say, I can't afford that? I can't afford to pay $800 a month just for my car note, plus $175 a month for my insurance, plus $200 a month for my gasoline. I mean, there comes a point where fewer and fewer people will find themselves in a position to be a part of buying a new car. So jobs will be lost in many cases. Prices will go up in many cases, and the affordability issue will be exacerbated in many cases. A lot of the inexpensive cars that General Motors has are either built in Korea or China. And a lot of them are built in Mexico. So if there's tariffs, and we know there's a 10% tariff coming out of China right now on Chinese imports, that's going to impact the most affordable cars that GM offers at the moment. It's going to be an issue.
All right, so all of you watching here, I know most of you are not subscribed, so I need you to hit that subscribe button. Whatever we need to do to get you to hit that subscribe button, Ray will do it. So just hit it for us and let us know what he needs to do down in the comments to get you to subscribe. So here's a question, and I want to be nice to this person. I think they are misinformed, but they're asking, will making cars in the USA make them cheaper and better quality? I can tell you that right now, if manufacturers could make stuff cheaper in the U.S. and if they can make it better quality in the U.S., then they would already be doing that now. But the simple fact is that labor and everything else costs more money in the U.S. than it does anywhere else. So this is why you're having production in Mexico. This is why you're having parts come from overseas. This is why everything is made in China, right? Because everything costs less anywhere else to produce other than here. But even when you get these tariffs that come into place, it still might be a fact of life for a company like Ford, even though they're saying that they would have to move production. It still even might be cheaper for them to produce everything in Mexico than to hire any kind of labor force. And it could be that, yes, the best intentions of the tariffs is to have more workforce, more labor, more people that are being hired by these automotive companies in the U.S. But when you do that, everything is going to cost more. So no, if things are made in USA, they are not going to be cheaper. And in my opinion, the quality won't be any better than what it was being produced somewhere else. And there's a chance that the quality might even be worse because they would potentially be cutting more corners because their costs are so high. So they're going to look anywhere to have their costs reduced so they can keep their profit margins high. So you might get the situation where prices are higher and quality is worse if you bring all the labor into the U.S.
If the manufacturers have to produce more vehicles in the U.S., and they have to hire more employees, well, they're going to be entry-level, lower experienced employees at building cars. Typically quality improves when employees have been around for a while and they know what the hell they're doing. I'm trying to be nice, but I just I don't see either improving, much like you. I don't think the quality would necessarily go up because you could have more inexperienced workers.
And a lot of the quality problems is coming from the design. It's not necessarily coming from them putting the vehicle together.
Yeah. And then it costs more. American labor costs more than labor in Mexico or labor in Canada or labor in Japan or labor in Korea or labor in China. It costs more here than anywhere. So, every if you had a business and you manufactured something, it is your duty as the owner of that business to find cheaper ways to get things done. And if that means that it's less expensive for you and more profitable for you to have what you need being built in Vietnam as opposed to being built in Champaign, Illinois, you're going to get it built in Vietnam. Where the most clothes come from? They don't come from the U.S. anymore. So, whatever business you might be in, you're always looking for ways to reduce your costs, not increase your costs. And so it's been a globalized manufacturing world since the end of World War II. So, how do you change all that? How do you change 75 or 80 years worth of how things have been? I'm just not sure.
So if we get tariffs that come in, and let's say at some point it's probably going to be, I would guess you're getting 25% from Mexico and Canada. That would be my guess. I think it's being postponed for right now. Maybe it's a bluff, but there's going to be something that's added. But if we get a 25% tariff from Mexico, from Canada, and then we still have the overseas tariffs from Europe, from China that are coming. China's already in place, but we have other tariffs that are coming in place from all these other countries. What do you think? Which automotive company do you think has the most to lose with tariffs that are coming into place? Which automotive companies do you think may not survive when we have these added costs that are coming into the system?
That's a good question, and honestly, one that I don't really have an answer for. I mean, because every one of these manufacturers has, set up shop both in the United States. I mean, you look at BMW; they've got their facilities in South Carolina. Subaru and I think Toyota have facilities both in Indiana and Alabama. Every one of the major players has manufacturing facilities in the United States, but they also have manufacturing facilities throughout the world. And the reason is so that they can cost average is what it boils down to. They know it's more expensive for them to build it here. So in order to cost average, to keep their costs down, they build a percentage of what they sell here, and they build a percentage of what they sell in Mexico or in Korea or wherever. I mean, it's all to cost average. And so I think, it probably impacts them all just about equally, because you look around, every one of these manufacturers has facilities to produce vehicles on every continent. Okay, it's German cars aren't just built in Germany. Many are built here. Many are built in South America. I'm sure there's some that are built in Africa. So it could just. I don't know what the answer is.
If I had to answer that question, I would say Nissan. Nissan would be my number one, that they can't survive any added costs and they can't survive any increase to their prices that they already had. They're already not selling at the price point that they're at. They're already not making the money they need to make. They're already in panic mode. They're already in emergency mode, whatever you want to call it. They're already trying to find a bailout from somewhere else. Who on earth knows why they would back out from any kind of agreement with Honda? That doesn't make any sense.
They didn't want to be a subsidiary. They want to be an equal, and that's great when you are an equal. But
when you got money, that's fine. Yeah.
But when you don't have that money, you're not an equal. You are subservient to the larger corporation that actually has the money that and the wherewithal to take you in. So at a certain point, you would think the good folks at Nissan would put their egos aside. But, like I said, Foxconn is looking at them, and so maybe their pitch will you get a free iPhone with every Nissan that you buy.
So before there was even tariff talk, Nissan was 12 to 16 months of cash left. Allegedly. And now if we're going to add tariffs on top of that, I mean, take that down another 4 to 6 months, we're in trouble.
Yeah, they're in trouble. They were one of the first to say, "Oh my goodness, we need to figure out how to save some money." And it's easier to say than to implement, and that's what they're finding out. It takes time. Much like Mercedes-Benz will find out, it takes time. You can't just say it and have it happen overnight. So yeah, Nissan might not be around by the time it could have happened.
Yeah, and they already have dealers that aren't making any money. I mean, I got a buddy who's a franchise manager at a Nissan dealership, and they're turning into a glorified used car dealer. Yeah. So, and now we have the stair step stuff that's coming from Nissan too. That's every dealer's favorite thing, right?
Yeah, they pretty much hate it. Yeah.
So
it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, I would assume that they're going to they'll be purchased by somebody in the next 8 to 12 months would be my assumption, because they're just not going to let it go bankrupt, I would guess. And maybe Honda owns it by that time. They get into a squeeze enough where they get a bailout, and then maybe they can be a company under Honda, and that looks a little bit better than bankruptcy, I would assume.
I would think, but apparently what do we know? The good folks at Nissan don't think it should play that way. I mean, what are they going to say? Hey, come on, we got the Z car. What do you have?
Yeah, well, I guess it's easy for us to talk about. We don't have any money invested into it. So
we don't have any skin in the game.
Yeah.
If you liked what you saw today, do us a favor right here at CarSense. Like and subscribe. We're new. We're growing. You can't do without us.